Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'm demonstrating how to make a half traditional hexagon. In a previous video I demonstrated how to make the traditional hexagon motif, so in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to make just half of one of those. I'll be using Lion Brand's Vanna's Choice and a furls hook. Let's begin. Okay, before I demonstrate how to actually make the half hexagon, I want to show you why you'd make a half hexagon. Here I have 3 regular hexagon motifs that I've made, the traditional hexagon ones. Again, check the link in the description for the tutorial for this one. And if I were putting these together to make a project, I'd basically be joining them together like this. Of course, there'd probably be a lot more of them. But then let's say this was a blanket or a rug or something like that, when it comes to the edges, let me move this one down here as if it too were attached. Down here, you can see along the edges, we'd have these gaps. And that can be fun too, but if you don't like the gaps and want a straight side, then that's where the half hexagon comes in. That just slips right in there and fills those gaps. So then when you make your border, you can get your nice straight edges. So now that you know why, let's get back to the how. All right, to begin the half hexagon, I'm going to begin with a slip knot on my hook, and I'm going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Now when I made the traditional hexagon, I made a longer chain and joined in a loop to work in the ring, but because we're making a half hex, I don't want to have that second half of the loop hanging loose, so we're going to start this a little differently. What I'm going to do, you can see I've already yarned over, I'm going to make a double crochet and then some other stitches in that third chain from the hook. That's the furthest one from the hook, the first one we made. We're going to use this little chain here as the center of our half hexagon. So the great thing about a slip knot is you can adjust this out. If you need to make this chain a little bigger to fit your stitches in and then tighten it afterwards, you can absolutely do that. So I like to work into the back hump of the chain, but whichever part you prefer is fine. I'm going to go ahead and make that double crochet I mentioned, like so. And then I am going to chain 3. Oops, let me find that end of my yarn again. Got a little tangled. 1, 2, 3. Then I'm going to make a cluster. And for this pattern, a cluster is basically a double crochet 3 together, all worked in the same stitch or space. So to do that, I will start a double crochet, stop with 2 loops left on the hook, go back into the stitch, stop with 3 loops left on the hook. So you can see we started 2 double crochets there, yarn over, pull up my loop through here. When I've got 4 loops on the hook, it's time to yarn over and finish that cluster. So then I chain 3 again. Oop, there we go. And do it again. 1 more cluster. And again, all back in this chain. You can see it's already pulling up quite a bit on its own. Just from the action of working into it is opening up that chain there, but I can close that up with the tail when I'm done. So don't worry too much about that at all right now. I'm going to make my second cluster here. Just remember, it's just like a double crochet 3 together, except you're working into the same stitch each time instead of actually gathering 3 stitches together, like so. Then finally we chain 3 one more time, and we're going to work a half cluster to finish it off. Now the chain 3 and the double crochet we did here the 2 skipped chains and the double crochet we did at the beginning, those count as our first half cluster. So I'm going to finish it off with another half cluster on the other side. To do that, I am going to double crochet 2 together. Pretty simple. But again, it's a cluster because they're worked into the same chain or space or the same stitch. Like so. So there is our double crochet 2 together cluster. You can see that's opened up quite a bit, but if I pull on that tail right there, let's see, now it doesn't want to work. If I pull on that tail right there, especially if I use my nail to stabilize the knot a little bit, that closes up quite a bit. And of course you'd want to work an edge along that side anyway in the demo earlier when I laid them out, so you can work into that a little bit to hide it as well too. But that is it for row 1 of the half hexagon. So let's move to row 2. I'm going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and turn to work back across the stitches we just made. Those 4 chains I just made count as a double crochet and chain 1. So from there, I am going to work some stitches in that first chain 3 space right there. First one is a cluster. Remember, this is a regular cluster, so it's a double crochet 3 together, all worked into that chain 3 space, like so. Then chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then another cluster right back in that chain 3 space. 1, 2, 3, like so, and pull through to finish that off. Now it's time to travel to the next chain 3 space, so we'll chain 3 again. 1, 2, and 3. And then in the next chain 3 space, we'll do the same thing. Cluster, chain 3, cluster. So there's the first cluster. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and cluster back in that chain 3 space again. 1, 2, and 3. The yarn's creeping up on me here. Let me pull up a little bit more loose. There we go. So I've got my cluster, chain 3 cluster in my chain 3 space, so I need to do that one more time in this last chain 3 space. But first, we'll chain 3 in order to get to it. Then we're over here, and we do our cluster, chain 3 cluster in this one. So let me finish up this cluster. There we are. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and then another cluster right back in that chain 3 space. Like so. Then to finish up the round, of course, or the row I should say, we want to make sure it's even on both sides. So what we're going to do is chain 1 and then double crochet in the top of that cluster. Now this is the half cluster that we started with, which was really just a skipped 2 chains and a double crochet. So what we want to look for is the top of that double crochet. And if you're having trouble finding it, sometimes it helps to flip the fabric over. And I can see those are the top 2 loops there. And that's where I want to put that last double crochet of row 2. So you can start to see we've got our clusters laid out here. Rows 1 and 2 of our half hexagon are done. So let's move on to row 3. We're going to begin with a turn and chain 2. I personally like to chain and then turn, however you prefer to do it. There we are. So I've got my chain 2. I'm going to double crochet in the first chain 1 space right there, like so. Then I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3, there we go, and then cluster in the next chain 3 space. Remember, this was a chain 1, so we come down here to where it's a chain 3 and work a cluster there, like so. Pull up a little bit more yarn to work with. Oops, my fingers wanted to disappear into the skein there. All right, so I've got my cluster. Then I'm going to chain 3 again, and that chain 3 space that we just worked into will only get 1 cluster worked into it right there. So we're going to come down to this one, and in this one we are going to work our cluster, chain 3 cluster. So let me make the first one here, like so. Then we chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and go right back into this one. So the previous one just got 1 cluster, but this one gets 2. And I think you'll see the pattern a little better when we get to the end of this row here. So that gets 2. Then I chain 3 again. Remember, we always chain 3 in between our clusters, except for when we get to the ends sometimes. But when we're in the main part of the row, we're always going to have a chain 3 in between. So in this next one, we'll get just 1 cluster again, like so. Then chain 3, so we can move to the next one, and this one gets 2. So 1, then 2, then 1, then 2. So we've got our first cluster here in this one, chain 3, oops, there we go, 1 more cluster in this one. There's 1 half double crochet, or half of a double crochet. That always gets me when I'm speaking out loud. There we go. That's our second cluster. And then we are right here, so we're going to chain 3 again. And then we've got another chain 3 section. So let's put a cluster there, like so. And you can see we've got, if we start at the beginning of row 3, we've got our half cluster here, which is sort of a half cluster. It's a chain 2 and double crochet. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. We're back at the other end. So how we're going to finish this up is with one more chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to work a double crochet 2 together, but I'm not calling this a half cluster because you'll notice we split these up. The chain 2 and then the double crochet at the beginning were in different spaces. We want to duplicate that on this side. So I will start the first double crochet in the chain 1 space, going right into that space there. Stop with 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, and then I want to put the second half of this double crochet 2 together in the 3rd chain, which would be like the top of a double crochet, since that's how it counted. And that just creates a little bit nicer edge right there. So I finish that up, and that's the end of round 3. Now, let me lay that out a little bit for you here so we can see it. The hexagon shape is starting to form. It's a little harder to see, but row 4 will be the one that really defines it. It's also going to be a lot more solid and lacy, solid than lacy, much more solid, and that will be great for joining together too. So let's begin. I'm going to chain 3, which is going to count as a first double crochet of this row, and turn. Then I'm going to work 2 double crochets in this first stitch right here, right back into the top of that double crochet 2 together. The first stitch of this row, I want to work 2 double crochets right there, like so. There. Then I'm going to move to the chain 3 spaces. I'm going to be skipping the clusters as I make this row, except for right here at the beginning and then again right at the end. So going to the chain 3 space, I'm going to work 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. These aren't clusters or anything. These are just 3 standard regular double crochets. Then I go to the next chain 3 space and do the same. 1, 2, and 3. Now, it gets a little different for the next chain 3 space, and there's a visual clue here. This is our first one that has 2 clusters worked into it, so we need to treat this chain 3 space just a little bit differently. This is where we're going to put the corner to create the hexagon shape. So it's going to be pretty similar to this move right here. We're going to do 3 double crochets, since that's what we're doing in this round, not clusters. Then I'm going to chain 2, 1, 2, like so. And then work 3 more double crochets right back in that same chain 3 space. And this will help create the corner to give us our hexagon shape. You can see that's starting to come together already. So after that, we do the same thing that we were doing before. Come over here, next chain 3 space, we get 3 double crochets. 2 and 3. Then we, go to the next chain 3 space, 3 more double crochets. 1 and 2 and 3, like so. Then we keep an eye out for this visual clue. We've got 2 clusters here, so we know this is another corner, which means 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. 3. There we go. Followed by a chain 2, 1 and 2, and then 3 more double crochets all back in that same chain 3 space. And that gives us the second corner in our half hexagon here, like so. Then back to the same. 3 double crochets in the chain 3 space. 1, 2, and 3, like so. 3 double crochets in the next chain 3 space. 1, 2, and 3. And then we are right back at the beginning. So we're going to find that double crochet. Since it's acting like a double crochet 2 together, we just want to work into the double crochet, ignore that little chain 2. And we're going to work 3 double crochets in the top of this stitch to finish it off. Didn't finish that stitch. There we go. All right, so that is the end of our half hexagon. So I'll go ahead and get my scissors and go ahead and cut your yarn like so and finish it off. And there you go. Now this doesn't really necessarily have a right side or a wrong side in terms of this section, but I really like having the final row or round of each motif be the right side. So however it works out best for you. And the great thing, of course, this can be used in any direction in any part of the blanket. But you can see now, if I line up our hexagons, maybe we can pull out just a little bit more for this. Okay, here we go. Now we can see a little bit more. So you can see I've got my 3 full-size hexagons lined up here, and of course it could be a whole field of them off to either side, but this is where you would use the half ones then. Here's the one we just made, and that tucks perfectly right, oops, right in there. And then you can attach all these sides together here, here, and here. You want to match up those corners, of course, as you go, but there should be the perfect number to match up right there. And then of course you can take more half hexagons. This is one from before. Start working out a bottom edge to your blanket, however you need, or whatever you're making, whatever project you're making, the half hexagon can really help fill in any gaps left in your larger project. So I hope you find this useful. I hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial. Please do check out the description for links both to the blog, where you'll find written pattern for the traditional half hexagon, as well as links to all the other videos that I've mentioned, and of course the traditional hexagon motif itself. Thank you so much for watching.